What is up, everybody? Hope you're having a great day. Welcome back to the Raw Prospect Podcast. My name is Emmy Nixon. Today is November 3rd. This is episode 82. And joining me from Austin, Texas, the Stat King himself, Michael Lean. What is up?
It's a cold and rainy day here in the ATX. However, as always, every Wednesday we are ready to talk some football. Our Week 9 picks coming a little bit later. But first, we have to talk about what happened, what transpired in the 2021 World Series. The 2021 baseball season has now come to a full conclusion. And the Atlanta Braves, the 88-win Atlanta Braves, are World Series champions. So we're going to kick it off with reactions to that. Maybe talk a little bit, and then we'll get into our picks. And be on the lookout for much more content coming, probably this weekend. NBA basketball episode coming. Be on the lookout for that. And then also, I appreciate all the views to be getting on San Antonio Spurs mini videos. That's been. I appreciate every single one of you. And hit the like and subscribe button if you like our content.
Right. And consider leaving a 5-star rating on
Exactly.
Apple and whatever podcast app you may be listening on, because that really helps us as well.
For sure. Okay,
Yeah.
So let's start with this basic question. How much of the World Series did you actually watch?
I watched like the final 5 innings of Game 1, Game 3, and Game 5.
Okay.
And then I watched the final 3 innings of Game 6 after it was already not really a game. But I kind of got the feel of what was kind of going on in the series. To me, it was basically the Braves made a decision to go with their group of bullpen pitchers in Game 5 so that they could have who pitched in Game 6?
Max Fried.
Yeah, Max Fried. So they could have Max Fried on full rest is basically what happened in my eyes, pretty much. And then from there, he just was dealing the whole night and closed it out. I mean, that Braves offense could do the bare minimum and they still would have won it. So props to him. I mean, he pitched an amazing game.
There's so much that we could go into here.
Yeah.
Take a time. I'm just going to keep it more to an Atlanta Braves perspective. I just want to talk about like the overall bigger picture implications of this championship for them and for the city of Atlanta as a whole. But before I do that, just a couple things on the Astros. Number one, Carlos Correa is officially a free agent. One of the best, relatively young shortstops in the game. And we're going to have extended off-season baseball coverage this winter, more than we usually do for a fact. But one thing I will say is this shortstop class, we've never seen anything like it. There are 4 or 5 star shortstops now officially free agents, and you know the importance of the shortstop position, even if you're like just a casual baseball fan. You're not really intimate with the game. And Carlos is one of the, if not the best years old. He's super clutch. So that's like the biggest storyline going into the offseason for Houston is can they retain Carlos Correa? Because it's likely that he's going to be asking for somewhere north of like a 10-year, $300 million contract. Or do one of these shortstop needy teams outbid them for Correa? It's like the number one biggest storyline in Houston. But otherwise, looking at the next year, just bigger picture, the Astros are still going to be in the playoff hunt. They're probably going to make the playoffs again. You look at this series, they didn't have Lance McCullers for the majority of the ALCS against the Red Sox, and they didn't have him for any of this series against the Braves, and that, he was their ace this year. And it's really hard to be like the Braves when you don't have your ace, and that really set their pitching back. That put a lot of stress on their bullpen. And the bullpen performed well, just not as the Braves bullpen, which was basically insane. So sure, you're still looking at a pretty good team going, but the Correa storyline is a huge one going off season. But we'll get way more into that down the line. Now, from a Braves perspective, first World Series title, first championship in Atlanta since 1995, first time in 26 years. Absolutely incredible. I can't tell you how happy I am for the fans in Atlanta in general. I mean, you think of all they've had to suffer through. Georgia football, losing in the national championship. The Falcons, we all know what happened to them in the Super Bowl. The Hawks, I know it's been a while since they've, they were in the Eastern Conference Finals last year. They have a young team, but they've been bad for so many years, and they made all those Eastern Conference Finals all those years ago. And then the Braves, they've been so close so many times. Last year, holding a 3-1 lead on the Dodgers in the NLCS, ended up losing that series in 7 games. This year, they get the job done. It's a pretty amazing story. I think this was a good team, a really good team, but an even better story. I wouldn't call it a great team because they didn't have Acuna. There's a possibility that if they had Acuna, it could have been a great team. But I think this was a really good team that got hot at the right time. They were 47-23 over their final 70 games, including the postseason. So they got hot at the right time. It was just a great story. And to go a little deeper into that, you look at the circumstances they had to overcome. They lost Acuna Jr., who at the time that he got hurt was leading the entire National League in wins above replacement, or a metric called WAR that you hear a lot in baseball. He was leading the entire National League in that metric, basically saying he was the best player in the National League at that point in time that he tore his ACL. They lost him. They lost Mike Soroka, a young pitcher who was supposed to be their ace. They lost him to a torn Achilles. Their record was 52-55. They were 3 games below 500 the day after the trading deadline. And they didn't have a winning record until August 6th. That was the first time they scratched the surface of above 500. And they ended up, as I said, going on this huge run, which is incredible. And they had the worst record of any team that made the playoffs this season, National League or American League. They had the record and beating Blue Jays in the American League, who didn't make the playoffs as well. So it's a pretty incredible story. Give credit where credit is due to the general manager, Alex Anthopoulos, who went out at the trade deadline, and it was sort of weird. But it was weird at the time. They went out, didn't make major moves, any household names, but they went out, they rebuilt the outfield, acquired 4 outfielders, Jock Peterson, Eddie Rosario, Adam Duvall, and Jorge Soler, names that baseball fans, like casual baseball fans, wouldn't have known if this didn't happen. And look, it's rare that the trade deadline actually has a tangible impact on a championship team. And this is exactly what the case was this year for Atlanta. Those 4 players, they combined to carry this team to the championship. They combined for 56% of the Atlanta Braves postseason RBIs, which is absolutely insane, and 52% of the Atlanta Braves home runs in the postseason. Absolutely incredible. And they're also the first team ever to acquire both a LCS MVP and a World Series MVP at the trade deadline. That would be Eddie Rosario beating the ALCS MVP and Jorge Soler being the World Series MVP. Absolutely incredible all around. I'm not going to go on too long, but just absolutely incredible. And they're the second team ever, just to wrap this up, to beat 3 95-plus win teams on their way to a World Series championship. They had to beat the 95-win Brewers. They had to face that brutal pitching staff. They had to beat the 106-win LA Dodgers, the favorites coming into this thing. They did that, and they did it relatively easy. And they had to beat this Astros team, which for the entirety of this baseball season was the deepest and best lineup in the entire Major League Baseball. And they overcame it all. Just incredible story, good team. And I think this is one that we'll remember for a long time. And for the Braves themselves, they have their own star baseman, their star first baseman who won the National League MVP just last season. Although it was a shortened season, he won that MVP. He's one. And also just one of I think he's he's become possibly one of my personalities in sports. If you listen to his interviews and his press conferences, he's a funny guy. He just gets it. Yeah. And I'm hoping that the Braves pay him because he's the cornerstone of that franchise along with Ronald Acuna Jr. Right. So that's all I really have to say.
Yeah, they caught lightning in a bottle. I mean, and
really did.
You mentioned the fact that they lost Ronald Acuna Jr. and also where they were at pretty late in the season, pretty late in the summer. August 6th, that's pretty deep into the season. That's probably 100 games in. So it just shows how important having a deep pitching staff is, because you never know when your hitting can get hot. And they made the moves at the trade deadline, and then combined that with a little bit of heat with the bats, then that was it.
One more thing I have to say, the incredible thing about this pitching staff, and think about this, they lost Charlie Morton for the season or for the rest of the series in game 1 when he took a grounder right back up the middle off his fibula, ended up having to miss the rest of the series and probably, some of next season with the fractured fibula, which is just incredible. And he actually ended up striking out 3 more Astros batters after the fact, after he fractured his fibula. I guess he didn't seem to know it was fractured. Adrenaline just took over. Yeah, but absolutely incredible. But the pitching staff, and I talked about all of the statistics and all the metrics said that this Astros lineup was the best and the deepest lineup in baseball coming in. They led all of Major League Baseball in OPS, which is the key metric that you measure teams by nowadays. They were top 5 in batting average, first in runs scored, and this Braves pitching staff without Charlie Morton and Mike Soroka for most of the series. Every win that they had, all 4 of their wins, they held the Astros to 2 runs or less. They held that offense to 2 runs or less in every single win of this series, which is absolutely incredible. So credit to them, man. All aspects, the general manager, the manager, Brian Snicker, and all of the players, all aspects, the lineup, these trade acquisitions, the bullpen was nailed, even on shorthanded, short rest, all of that.
Right.
They overcame it, and that's what you have to do to win the World Series. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint like some of these other sports that we talk about. It's a marathon.
Sure. Yeah, and you have to really be able to manage the load on these pitchers. But one thing I will say before we move on is I'm just like thinking back to some of the coverage we had on baseball in the preseason, or spring training in baseball, not preseason. A lot of the talk we had was that baseball was very top heavy. And you know what? I mean, with how this season played out, maybe it just wasn't as top heavy as we thought. I mean, you had 3 of the best teams in baseball, really, teams that we did not see coming at all. The Braves, who won the World Series, then San Francisco Giants, who won 107 games, and then the Red Sox, who made it to the ALCS. And took the Astros to the brink.
Exactly. And last thing I'll say, and we got to move on. If you look at all 4 major sports in America today, the MLB, the NFL, the NBA, and the NHL, last 21 seasons has had 15 different teams win the World Series. And you think that that's more than any other of these leagues. The NFL's had 11 teams, the NBA's had 11 teams, and the NHL has had 12 teams. Baseball's had 15 teams. And that's all despite the fact that it seems like every year we say baseball's sort of top heavy. But in reality, and we've seen it 2 of the past 3 years now. Think about the Nationals a couple of years ago.
Right.
No one expected them to make a run, and they did. The fact is, once you get to the postseason, it's a crapshoot. It really is.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the beauty of the wild card, I guess. But that'll do it for our baseball segment. I think we had some pretty interesting conversation there. I'm looking forward to our off-season baseball stuff, because I think for me, someone who's still trying to get into baseball, if I'm able to follow the off-season, all the moves that are going on, I'll be able to know the league a lot better, just based on where all the stars are at. So
it'll get you in a better position going into spring training.
Right, exactly.
And it's a great free agency class. I mean, it really is. So really, I know a couple of years ago we had the great pitching class with like Garrett Cole and all those guys. This year it's more like position players. But there will be trades as well, of course. And baseball is different than any other sport. Once the World Series ends, everyone's a free agent. Anyone can be signed at any time. Free agency starts directly after the World Series game concludes. It's probably going to be a while because, there's this they're going to negotiate a new collective bargaining agreement, and it's likely that the National League is going to they're no longer going to have pitchers hit, which will help the game a lot. And there are a lot of rules up for negotiation and all that stuff. So it could be a while before we get our first slew of free agency moves. But once we do, we're going to be talking about those on this podcast.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So great baseball season, but that's going to do it for that. We're going to move on to our football. Week 9 here. So first game, Thursday night, it's Jets at Colts. Mike White starting at quarterback for the Jets, of course, coming off that upset win against the Bengals, and then Indianapolis coming off the heartbreak.
Exactly,
that
against the
loss
Titans.
to the Titans. Yeah.
You start with this one. I'm going to pull something up real fast. What do you think?
Well, this one's tough because I think if the Colts do the right things, they should be able to cover. But it's difficult because you saw the Bengals sit back in their zone coverages and Mike White just picked them apart. So if the Colts aren't careful and they take this game a little bit lightly, then the Jets could keep this close. But I'm not going to bet on that. I think the strength of the Jets defensively doesn't match up as well against this Colts team. They have their offensive line back healthy. They have Eric Fisher in the lineup as well as Quentin Nelson now. So I think this Colts team is going to be able to run the football, get their play action game going. And it seems like the Colts are, despite that loss to Tennessee, they're starting to find themselves. And we saw last week the Bengals, they were a team that was a little bit shaky. And some of their coaching questions that we had for them coming into the year kind of showed themselves. And I don't think those kind of problems will happen for the Colts. So I'm taking the Colts to cover.
Yeah, you just sort of feel like, and look, last week, who would have thought? Both of our locks last week got screwed by backup quarterbacks. You, Tampa Bay, by Trevor Siemian. I just kind of sort of forgot that New Orleans seems to be Tom Brady's kryptonite. I just sort of forgot that when we were talking about the game this year. He's now 0-3, aside from the playoffs, I guess. 0-3 in the regular season against New Orleans now. But yeah, and then who would have thought that Mike White in his first ever NFL start would have thrown for 400 yards against the Bengals defense? And who would have thought they would win that game when they were down by 11 with 4 minutes left? It's just absolutely insane.
Right. I don't even think the Jets thought it because they were the ones that traded for Joe Flacco.
Exactly. And look, in addition to that, and I know they beat the Jaguars, but Geno Smith and then Cooper Rush both played really well, and they won their games as well. But yeah, I think I have to agree with you. The Colts did lose T.Y. Hilton and safety Kari Willis to injuries in that devastating loss to the Titans. But I do agree with you. This running game for the Colts is going to they're going to pound the Jets. They really have to have this game now. It's on a short week, which I do worry about, but they're at home. It might be different if this game were going to be played in New York, but they're at home. And it was just sort of an embarrassing way to lose that game last week. And I think a veteran-ish team like the Colts will know how to rebound from that. And I actually, aside from some of these weird losses, the weird loss to Baltimore a couple weeks ago where they had that game in the bag and ended up losing, and then last week against the Titans, it's just, I feel like they're a better team. They're playing better football than their record shows.
Right.
And outside of now 2 bad games against the Titans, you look at Carson Wentz's numbers outside of the 2 games against Tennessee, and it's like MVP caliber quarterback. I mean, seriously. So I think he'll have a rebound game. I see Jonathan Taylor going for 100 plus, and I think the Colts will win by 2+ touchdowns. 2 touchdowns, 14, 17 points. I do worry about like a backdoor cover by the Jets, though. That's what I do worry about.
Yeah, and I worry about maybe that Jets defensive line waking up a little bit, but they haven't seemed to be too consistent, and I like this Colts offensive line. And one other thing is, you mentioned yourself, I mean, I feel like you've been more right about the Colts than I was, even though I've been more right about their record. In terms of the play on the field, you've been absolutely right about them being a playoff caliber team. They just haven't won these close games. So
maybe next week, since this NFL season is 18 weeks, maybe next week we'll do like a mid-season thing where we how we did that panic meter episode a couple weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
I think we should do something like that again next week, just to like gauge some of the pack wild cardish teams. But we'll do that next week.
Right.
So our next game is at Atlanta Falcons at Trevor Siemian led New Orleans Saints. What do you think?
Man, well, I'll say this to lead off. I think Sean Payton is unquestionably the front runner for Coach of the Year. I mean, everything that he's had to deal with in terms of roster changes and finding ways to move the ball on offense with this inexperience of a receiving core, and with a quarterback like Jameis Winston, like it's been an incredible job. But now it's gonna get even tougher because now it's Trevor Siemian in that quarterback. But I still think it's the same things. They're still going to rely on this defense, and they're still going to try to lean on Alvin Kamara. So I kind of see the Saints and the Steelers in a similar light. Like, they put up like 23 points, and we're going to pound you with our defense and scrap out wins like that. But I don't know. I just think it's so tough because I think the Falcons just had an off game last week. I mean, if you look at them, their ability to get to Kyle Pitts last week, I mean, they had him open a few times. They just weren't hitting him. Like, oh, man.
You know what my logic is on this? It's tough. But as we know, it's really hard to the Falcons. But you know what? And this is just kind of like stupid logic or whatever you want to call it. I think the team is energized now by the fact that the Braves won the World Series. I think the Falcons, whoever played, but going into that game, it averaged 30+ points per game in their 3 prior outings before last week. So I think this offense will sort of find a way to move the ball, and they'll get close. My question really lies with Trevor Siemian. I don't know if he could play like he did last week, but we're going to find out. And this game is like their 3rd game in the Superdome. So they haven't really played a lot at home yet, and we know it's a really tough place to play, and I do worry about that. It's a really good New Orleans. I think it's too many points.
Yeah,
with a backup quarterback.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to agree with you. I mean, it's different it's a whole different situation going into a game, stepping in like the second quarter in a tie game, rather than being the starter going into the week and having a team game plan for you. So, I mean, I know it's the Falcons, but I mean, come on, just like they should be able to keep this within 6 points. They have to.
Right.
Oh man. All right.
Next, I'm going to be quick with this next game.
Yeah.
I'm going to take it's a Buffalo minus 14.5 at Jacksonville. I'm taking Buffalo minus 14.5 at Jacksonville. The Bills have feasted on bad teams against teams or a below 500 record, I should say. They are 4-0, and they have won those 4 games by an average margin of 28 points per game. They dominate bad teams, and so I'm gonna have to say that continues.
Right. Yeah.
Bills
I'm picking
14.5.
Yeah, I'm picking the Bills as well. Pretty simple here. They're just so much better of a team.
Yep. Okay, next one. I want to hear your thoughts. AFC North Football. Cleveland. There's a lot going on in Cleveland right now, to say the least. At Cincinnati, coming off a bad loss to the Jets. What do you see here? It's kind of weird, like a interesting game in terms of like storylines.
Right. And the timing, they're going against each other. Both
Yeah,
of these
exactly.
teams feel desperate in a way. Well, Cleveland more so, but
Right.
Cincinnati definitely has something to prove for sure. Okay. This game, it's all going to come down to, can this Cincinnati offensive line hold up? I mean, we see it in the games where Cincinnati is playing a not so good pass rush. This offense pops. When they're playing a great pass rush, like, well, okay, maybe not great, but when they're playing a pass rush that's playing well, this offense looks a little bit more tameable, because there's only so much Joe Burrow can do back there. So, I mean, I think Myles Garrett and Jadeveon Clowney can win these matchups. I think that's what it comes down to. I think it's going to be really close. But I think I'm going to take the Browns to win the game. Because number one, I like Kevin Stefanski, and I think at some point the talent on this team will show. They're getting healthier. I mean, I might be wrong on this, but that's what I'm thinking. And then number two, I don't trust the Cincinnati offensive line to block Myles Garrett for four quarters. I can't talk. Oh my gosh.
This game is so tough. I'm coming off 3.5 hours of watching the Browns absolutely suck it up against Pittsburgh. And I'm also coming off watching the Cincinnati Bengals lose to the Jets in a game which they had a 11-point lead with 4 minutes left.
Right.
So, and it's AFC North Football. It's going to be close. We know that. And that's why this line is the way that it is. Vegas knows what they're doing.
Right.
I'm actually going to disagree with you, though. And I'm going to pick Cincinnati to recover from that Jets loss. Look, for a couple different reasons. Number one, the Browns once again are struggling to beat good teams. They're now 0-3 against teams that have winning records. Their offense, the better part of the last month and a half, has looked awful, with the exception of that Chargers game where they scored 40 plus. They have scored 17 points or less in 4 out of the last 5 games. And look, I saw a lot of people on Twitter blaming Baker Mayfield for last week and all this stuff. And there's, so many fingers are pointing in all different directions. But Baker Mayfield, they should be playing Case Keenum because despite what he may say, you can tell he's not totally 100%. You can't fault Baker Mayfield for the struggles, especially last week against Pittsburgh. He still completed 60% of his passes, and that's with 7 drops by wide receivers last week, including a couple by Jarvis Landry, who rarely ever dropped any.
Right.
So there's a lot of pointing fingers here. I don't like the state that they're in going into the game. And I think, as we saw last week, I mean, the Browns really didn't commit to the run game much. I thought they should have committed more to the run game in that last week's game against the Steelers. But the Bengals are well equipped to stop the run. They rank 7th in the NFL in run defense, only allowing about 95 rushing yards per game. That's exactly what the Steelers did a week ago, is they held Nick Chubb in that rushing attack to under 100 yards, and they said, beat us, let physically compromised Baker beat us. I'm not going to really believe in Cleveland until I see this offense regain its confidence and regain its rhythm. And I'm going to count on the fact that Cincinnati will do a good enough job with blocking those 2 edge rushers.
Right.
Pittsburgh, we had a rookie starting at left tackle, a 4th round draft pick, blocking Myles Garrett on Sunday, and he did. I mean, it wasn't anything to write home about, but he did an okay job. If they can, and I think we're really going to see like how good of a coach is Zach Taylor.
Yeah,
a really good coach in this spot will have his team like ready to play and like ready to go, especially after a loss to a really bad team,
right.
Like the Jets. So we're gonna find out. This game's gonna say a lot about both of these teams. I think we're gonna get some clarity within the AFC North this week, I believe.
Right. And I'm really excited to watch this one regardless. I really like Joe Burrow.
I do too.
Yeah. All right.
He had a sort of a clunker last week, but I think he'll rebound. But it's AFC North football. It's so hard to predict.
Yep.
So we'll see.
Yep.
Okay, your Dallas Cowboys are 6-1, and they are hosting the Denver Broncos, -9.5. I don't believe we have clarity as to whether or not Dak Prescott will play, but you know more than I do. So fire away on your pick.
All indications are pointing to Dak playing. But I mean, we thought that last week as well. And then Cowboys camp said, no, we're not going to let him play. So, anything can happen. But assuming that he will play, I think the Cowboys should be able to take care of business. I like this Broncos roster. I've said it before. I'll say it again. I think their team's talent has not shown up the way it's supposed to. Their team's talent is, I believe, playoff caliber if you look up and down this roster, but it hasn't came together. And this is a Cowboys team clicking on all cylinders right now. I do worry a little bit about a letdown game. This does feel like a spot where maybe if the Broncos defense steps up a little bit, that they could cause a little bit of problems, especially since Tyron Smith is out at left tackle. But I'm gonna have faith in my team. I think they can get it done to cover.
I think I have to agree with you. I'm going on the assumption that Dak is going to play. I think he will end up playing in this game. Minus 9.5 against the Broncos team. They're just one of those teams that feel really limited as to what they can do and how many points they can score offensively. A Dallas team that can put up points in a hurry and is playing absolutely out of their mind, and they're without arguably their best player and DeMarcus, or their best pass rusher in DeMarcus Lawrence. But give credit where credit is due. And I think Colin Cowherd brought up a really good point the other day. Dallas feels like a Super Bowl team because they have playmakers at every single level. I mean, you think about Randy Gregory and when he comes back, DeMarcus Lawrence on that defensive front. Micah Parsons playing absolutely out of his mind right now in the middle of that defense. Trayvon Diggs in the secondary. On offense, you have all the receivers, including Cedric Wilson, who stepped up big time in place of Michael Gallup. Ezekiel Elliott, who made a huge play late in that Vikings game.
Right.
Tony Pollard as well. The tight end group has really stepped up. Dalton Schultz. The offensive line is playing well. I mean, every single positional group of this Dallas team has a defined guy that can make plays at opportune times. And that's why it really feels like with Dak, with a healthy Dak, they feel to me like possibly the best team in the NFC right now. Because you think about bigger picture, the Buccaneers are coming off of a loss. They didn't look all too great in that loss, and we know their secondary is still relatively compromised in terms of injuries. The Cardinals are a little banged up now. They're coming off a loss. Green Bay is now going to be missing Aaron Rodgers for at least a game, maybe 2 games. In Dallas, you look at their schedule. I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves right now. But you look at their schedule. I mean, you tell me, what game are they going to lose in the next month?
It's a little bit later on, but I'd probably look at that Arizona game. But you're right. I mean, there's a lot of games that are really winnable, especially in division games. This division is a one-horse race. So,
and of course, we never want to get too far ahead of ourselves. We're just entering November. We know everything changes when you get into November and December football, right? We all know exactly
that.
Yep. But based on what we've seen so far, you cannot tell me that, nobody can tell me or you that Dallas right now, being the best team in the NFC, is ludicrous. I think it's totally plausible that right now they're the best team in the NFC.
Right. And I'd probably look at the Rams as a team that look interesting, but we're not going to play the Rams this year, so I guess we won't know until the playoffs.
I didn't mention the Rams, and we got to talk about them because they just made a big trade. Mm-hmm. We'll talk about them for this week's Sunday night game.
Right.
And that Sunday night game has probably the 2 biggest stories in the NFL right now. Titans lost Derrick Henry, and the Rams acquired Von Miller. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. But next game, Houston Texans at Miami Dolphins. 2 bad teams. Miami minus 6.5.
And Tyrod Taylor is coming back this week.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah.
I did not know that.
Yeah, coming off IR. Yeah, I have no clue right now. I have no clue. And honestly, I don't care. I'm just gonna pick the Texans to cover. I don't feel good about it, but I think maybe having Tyrod back might bring a little bit of juice back. I mean, we saw them play pretty good offensively in the first week. Obviously, that's week 1, and it was against the Jaguars of all teams. But I do think Tyrod is a much better quarterback than Davis Mills. So it's tough, but I'm just gonna go with the Texans because I don't know who to pick.
I think agree with you. The more I think about it sounds absolutely crazy, considering the fact that they have just been awful ever since they won in week 1, pretty much, and ever since Tyrod Taylor was hurt. But yes, I do think Tyrod Taylor coming back matters, and I think he can provide them with a certain energy and a spark. Even if they don't win this game, I think they can keep it close. Miami hasn't been good. They have all sorts of chaos going on. These are two teams both coming into this game on 7-game losing streaks. But if you look at the competition, I mean, the Texans have had to play the Rams. They've had to play the
Cardinals,
all of the Bills.
right?
They've had a brutal schedule. They haven't played a team worse than like the Colts and the Patriots. I mean, that's as easy as it's gotten. And those two teams are like the way that they play, they seem to be like playoff caliber. They seem to be even better than their record shows. Yet the Dolphins in this 7-game losing streak, they've lost to the Jaguars and the Falcons. I mean, why am I supposed to believe that they're 6.5 points better than the Texans when they've played far inferior competition to Houston?
Right.
And Houston has Tyrod Taylor coming back. So I'm on Houston plus 6.5.
Yeah. Give me that all day for sure. Next game, Las Vegas Raiders at the New York Giants. Weird, tough news came out of Las Vegas camp yesterday.
Yeah.
Henry Ruggs is involved in a car crash, a fatal car crash, where I believe a woman and her dog died.
Did you see
the crash?
Did you see the details that came out today?
I heard about them, but I don't think I got all of them.
So basically, Ruggs was double the legal blood alcohol content.
Right, I knew that.
0.161. That's a little over double the legal limit of 0.08. He was driving at a very, very, very high speed, 156 miles per hour when the collision occurred.
Wow.
And police found a loaded gun in his car. So all of those aspects factor into this. He's looking at a 20 to 25-year prison sentence if he is in fact charged guilty of DUI and death and all this stuff. It's just bad decision making. Is terrible to hear about the woman and her dog that burned alive in the car and all this stuff. But in terms of the football, aside from all that stuff, it's likely that Henry Ruggs will never play football again. Just get over it.
Yeah. And if he does, then the NFL has some explaining to do because he shouldn't.
Well, he won't.
Yeah.
He's already been Raiders, and he's going to be in prison sooner rather than later. He already is in prison, but he's going to stay there for the better part of his life now. Anyways, from a football perspective, which is what we're here to talk about, I think, look, the Giants had an opportunity to steal that Kansas City game, and a penalty and a couple penalties here and there and a mistake here and there really killed them. It's really been the theme of the season. And ever since John Gruden was, I guess, parted ways with the Raiders or was fired or whatever you want to say, the Raiders seem to be playing at a really high level ever since then, the past 2 weeks. I like the Raiders. I love the way Derek Carr is playing. Even without Henry Ruggs, I don't even care. I'm going to take the Raiders -2.5 at the Giants.
Right. I'm going to take the Raiders as well. I think I think this team is good enough offensively to weather that, weather what happened. And I think Bryan Edwards can at least cover a little bit of that deep threat role as well. And also another player I like is going to be put in a bigger role, Hunter Renfrow. He's one of my favorite players in the league to watch. So that'll be fun as well.
It will. So we agree there. Moving on, we have two interesting games here. Minnesota at Baltimore, -5.5. For me, in terms of this game, and this might surprise you a little bit, I'm going to take Baltimore to win, but I'm going to take Minnesota +5.5. The reason being, I feel like people are going to be fading the Vikings now that they lost to a backup quarterback at home. And there just sort of seems to be a bad energy in Minnesota right now. But I think Minnesota is going to be able to create pressure on Lamar Jackson. They ranked first in the NFL and second in total sacks, only to the Rams with 24. And you look at this Baltimore offensive line, while it's solid as a whole, they've still given up 21 sacks to Lamar Jackson this season. And Alejandro Villanueva, a former Steeler at that right tackle spot or left tackle spot, I'm not sure which one he plays, but he's been, I believe it's right tackle. He's been a big liability in terms of this offensive line. I feel like the Minnesota pass rush is going to be able to create some havoc in that backfield with Lamar Jackson. And I also think that these receivers of Minnesota, these weapons, and Kirk Cousins, they're going to be able to have some success in the passing game against not so great Baltimore secondary to this point. They're 32nd in passing yards allowed per game coming into this game. And I know I could be totally wrong on this. You have a Hall of Fame, really good caliber coach coming off a bye week play. Know what Baltimore is. They have an identity. They're going to run the heck out of the football. And it could just be that Minnesota crumbles down the stretch. But I feel pretty good about the fact that Minnesota can keep this game relatively close, because it seems to me that every game they play comes down to the wire.
Yeah, that definitely is true. And, that's an interesting angle. I mean, I would agree with you on that pass rush point, but I think Danielle Hunter is out for the year, and that really that changes things for me a little bit. I mean, I know Everson Griffin has been playing fantastic. He's really revitalized things since he returned to Minnesota, but I just think I don't know if I can trust this coaching staff. And, they could have a bounce back week. They could come out with a more aggressive game plan. It could just be that they wanted to play a little bit more safe since they were playing a backup quarterback. But like I said, I don't trust this coaching staff to come up with an offensive game plan that plays to their strengths and like maximized. Like they are so set on running the ball on first down, and it puts them in 2nd and 8, 3rd and 8, and it just puts so much pressure on their offense on 2nd and 3rd down, because they're not getting a good amount of yards on that first down play. It puts so much pressure. So I'm going to pick Baltimore to cover. I don't feel particularly great about it, because I think definitely Minnesota is going to look to bounce back, and they have the players to bounce back. But I don't know if I can trust this coaching staff.
This will be a one I have my eye on possibly changing near the end of the episode. Now that I think about it, Baltimore coming off a bye week, and they've been sitting on that bad Cincinnati loss at home for 2 weeks now. They've been thinking about that, and they have the coach and the culture and the system to where you would think that they're playing at home against a team that seems to be down in the dumps right now. But I also think there's a scenario where Minnesota comes out with a vengeance. They're able to move the ball on this not so great. I won't call it a terrible secondary. I don't think it's that, because even though they're last in yards per game allowed, I think that can be kind of a sort of a fluky stat, if you will.
Yeah, misleading a little.
I don't think that tells the entire story, but it hasn't been great.
Right.
Let's just say that. More secondary of years past. Let's just say that. And I think Minnesota can have success. And I also think their pass rush, I can see a scenario where it does create a little bit of havoc for Lamar Jackson. So this game can go one of two ways, I think. Baltimore wins by a decent margin. Minnesota keeps it close and still loses. But we'll come back to it at the end.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting game. I can see Minnesota keeping it close for sure. So next game, New England Patriots -3.5 at Carolina. This is another interesting one. I was pretty high on the Patriots coming into the year.
You were right. I think you were right, but keep going.
Yeah, it's interesting because they started off the year a little bit shaky, but I think things are starting to work its way out. I think they're starting to work out the kinks in a very Belichickian sort of way. They always seem to start the year a little bit slow, and this year it was obviously compounded a little more because of the fact that they have a rookie quarterback in there rather than Tom Brady. So I do think the Patriots are a team that's trending up. I think they're playing playoff caliber football, and I think they'll be able to move the ball enough. The question is, what does Sam Darnold look like going back up against its Belichick defense? And I'm not betting on it looking too good, because Belichick just seems to have Sam Darnold's number. And Sam Darnold isn't exactly coming into this game playing well either. So
far from well.
Yeah, I'm going to take the Patriots. But I do think the Panthers defense is no slouch. So I think if it's decently close, if the Panthers can steal a touchdown here and there, or a turnover here and there, they can keep it close. But I trust Belichick in this matchup to cover.
I think you hit everything I wanted to say. I do have a couple things to add, and I think this is going to be my lock of the week for the season, -3.5 at Carolina. Look, you hit it right on the head. They're trending upwards. They're a team that what you said they would do and what a lot of people said they were going to be coming into the season. They run the football. Damian Harris averaging the 6th most rushing yards per game in the entire NFL. They have a really good offensive line, solid offensive line. Mac Jones is really exceptional. I'll get more into that in a second. And their defense is playing really good. They're a top 10 defense. And we know that they're good on special teams. They're good in all three phases, and they seem to get a play here and there in all three phases to go their way the past couple of weeks. But in terms of Mac Jones, on the 68, basically 2,000 yards. He's 3 yards away from 2,000 yards. And when you really think about it, he's on pace for 4,000 yards passing, which is really something to behold when you think about these New England weapons. They're obviously improved in that category, but they're still not great. And everything that's been going on with this New England team. And everyone says that he's checked down Charlie, but he's actually averaging 7.1 yards per attempt, 9 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, and a 90 quarterback rating. He's playing really good. Right. And the first couple of weeks, he struggled on those throws, 20-plus yards down the field. His numbers weren't good the first 5 weeks of the season, but the past 3 weeks, he's completing about 60% throws, 20-plus yards down the field with 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, and a 142.4 passer rating. And that's really the thing that I thought was missing, and a lot of people agree that was missing from the New England offense, was the deep ball component. And I know this is a different conversation for another day, but I feel like a Deshaun Jackson, who was just released by the Rams, could really help them in that department. Look, they're playing really well. Carolina is a mess right now. I know there's a possibility that Christian McCaffrey comes back maybe this week, if not next week, and that'll help them, of course. But I just don't think they're in a good spot right now. And I think Belichick against Matt Rule is sort of a coaching mismatch.
Right. It's not even like Matt Rule is a bad coach. It's
Belichick
not. Is
he's going to figure out a way to confuse an already confused Sam Darnold.
Yeah.
He thrives in these spots. So New England -3.5. You were right. They feel like a wild card team. I don't think they're good enough to win the division. I do not think they're good enough to win a Super Bowl, but they're definitely good enough and playing good enough football to get into the playoffs and maybe steal a game in the playoffs. So I think they're gonna win this game pretty convincingly.
Yeah. I'll say one more thing about the Patriots also. I questioned their move of cutting Cam Newton. I thought maybe he would be helpful to this team, like just as a red zone threat. But I actually think cutting Cam Newton has actually allowed the Patriots to work through Mac Jones's growing pains a little bit. And he's finding his way now. He's really working through that. And I didn't see that foresight that maybe they had when they were watching him in camp. So, yeah, credit to them.
Credit to them. Yeah. So moving on, we're coming down the home stretch here in week number 9. We have a Los Angeles Chargers team that's lost 2 in a row. It sort of looks bad, to be honest with you. At the Philadelphia Eagles, Chargers -1.5.
Yeah. Here's what I think about the Chargers. I think they're this year's version of last year's Cardinals. I think there's a few pockets of this roster that need addressing. And I also think they're just a little bit squishy up front in that defensive line. So I think that's why they struggle against these physical brand of football teams. Obviously, we saw that with the Cowboys. We saw that with Baltimore and also New England. So it's just that physical brand of football, just running it down their throat. That kind of style that really throws them off their game. So with that being said, do I expect the Eagles to be able to do that against this team? No. Um, I I
I
don't know why this line is so small, to be honest. Maybe they're seeing something I'm not, but I don't see the Detroit win as a real changer of how I see this Eagles team. I still think they're not a good football team overall, just offensively. So I'm gonna pick the Chargers to win. I'm gonna pick them as my lock of the week.
Okay, I like that. I think the line is more so. It's not really the Eagles as much as it is the Chargers just not
Mm,
looking the part the past couple
right.
weeks. Um, Justin Herbert has gone into a little bit of a slump here the past couple weeks, but when in doubt, pick the better coach and the better quarterback. And I think even though he's new, Brandon Staley's a better coach than Nick Sirianni, and we all know that Justin Herbert is a lot better than Jalen Hurts. It's not even close. So I think the Chargers, they can't lose this game. I mean, you hate to start, what was it, 4-1, and all of a sudden be 4-4. Like that's not what you want.
Right.
Even though the AFC is loaded, and there are a lot of like middling teams that are on that like 4-4 range, and you're still in it. You got to beat the teams that you're better than. So I think they're going to do that, and I
Right. And
really
then
like it as your lock. But
right. And one other thing I'll say is the Chiefs are still at their back as well. So if they lose this game, um, that really puts a damper on like, okay, we have a little bit of a gap, but because the Chiefs already got their win this week. So I think they know the Chiefs are coming, and I think they're going to come out with a little bit of more energy this week. Um, another thing
yeah,
is,
they really.
oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, you finish your point, and then I'll.
It was actually just another separate point. The Chargers like to run this like quarters coverage, cover four, drop back, and they like to stop the big play. But that really just for a team like the Cowboys and the Ravens and the Patriots, they're like, hell yeah, we'll take those 5 yard runs all day, because that's what a defense with the safeties back like that gives up. That's what they're um, exposed to, and they don't have an Aaron Donald up front that can keep them from giving up those runs. So that's what they're missing.
Right. Yeah, and you talked about the division. Like you can't take this far of a step back in that particular division. I mean, even who a lot of people consider to be like playing the worst football in that division. I mean, the Broncos have 4 wins. The Chiefs have 4 wins. The Raiders have 5 wins. And the more you fall behind, the worse it is for you come later in the season, because there are so many teams in contention for those wild card spots in the AFC. Um, and a couple of weeks ago, we thought the Chargers could win this division, but now it's like you got to come out and win this game pretty convincingly.
Right.
But anyways, on to our next one. It's an interesting one. I know the Cardinals have some injuries. They say Kyler Murray is going to play. He's likely to play on Sunday, but he's got a banged up ankle. I know DeAndre Hopkins is dealing with something as well. AJ Green was just put on the COVID list. They're now without JJ Watt. All of these injuries are piling up for the Cardinals, and they're playing at a San Francisco team that feels still in that like desperate category here. They've lost 7 straight home games, but they're coming off a good win against Chicago last week. So it's Arizona -2.5. What is your feeling on this divisional? matchup?
Well, some of the things that I had predicted in that Cardinals Packers game kind of came to fruition. It was just that running game, and they really pounded this Cardinals front without JJ Watt in there. And that's kind of what I worry about in this matchup too. I mean, obviously Jimmy Garoppolo is not Aaron Rodgers, but I'm not sure if you were able to catch that Bears game, but that's actually what the game that was on here in Kansas. And I think Jimmy Garoppolo quietly had one of the best games that I've seen him play. I mean, he was really sharp throwing down the field. He had a few really great throws down the middle to Deebo Samuel that like really impressed me. And he was just really sharp all around. So I think maybe they found something. And I think since this offensive line is starting to get healthy again, they've got Trent Brown, they got Mike McGlinchey back. I think I'm going to take the 49ers here. I don't know if they'll win, but I think this game is going to come down to the wire. I feel pretty comfortable saying that.
I agree with you. If Kyler Murray plays, it's unlikely that he'll be 100%. They could be without Hopkins. They're going to be without AJ Green. We know that. And they rely on those explosive plays. When you look at San Francisco, a couple weeks back, they held this Cardinals offense down. They were at full strength at that point, and they outplayed the Cardinals in that game. They lost 17-10 because their offense was struggling at the time as well. But they know how to stop this Arizona offense. And in that game that they had Trey Lance playing, that was the one game they had Trey Lance play, they stayed in that game. And I think they've created a little bit of momentum now with that victory over the Bears offensively. And they're going to be able to take it to a Cardinals team that is a little banged up. I don't know if they win, but I feel like this is a spot for San Francisco. They want to get back in this thing. This is where they got to do it.
Right, exactly. This is a really big game as well. And, I think it's probably the most underrated game when you look at this slate. I really am interested to see what happens in this one.
Right. NFC West football is always – these matchups are always fun. So moving on, Green Bay Packers at Kansas City. The line went from basically a pick'em to -7.5 in Kansas City's favor once the news came out this morning that Aaron Rodgers tested positive for COVID. So, Emmy, what do you think?
I think it's a no-brainer. I think Vegas is underrating the other parts of this Packers team. That's what I think. You look at the game the Packers played last week. They ran the football and they just controlled the line of scrimmage the entire game. And then defensively, they were the first team all year that was able to keep Kyler Murray in the pocket. And they run that cover 4 scheme. They're really disciplined in their coverages, and they're going to get Jair Alexander back as well. I feel really good about picking the Packers here. I really like this Packers team. Obviously, we're not going to know what we're going to get from Jordan Love, but they're going to lean on this running game. There's no indication to me that Kansas City is going to be able to stop the running game. And I just think with the style of defense the Packers like to play, it's going to cause some problems for this Chiefs offense because we see it. I mean, we've seen it over and over again this year. Teams lay back, and we saw it in the Giants game. They give the Chiefs a lot of room. And early in the game, Mahomes was like, okay, I'm just going to dink and dunk. I'm going to hit these guys on the perimeter. But then as the game moved along, he started to get impatient. He started bailing from clean pockets. He started forcing. And that seems to be a common tendency here. And I don't think I'm betting on that showing up again here.
We've talked a lot in this podcast about teams that don't necessarily have like the greatest records in the world, but we feel like they're playing like playoff caliber football. The Patriots being one of those teams, the Colts being another one of those teams. There's a lot of those teams in the NFL right now. They're hanging like around 500, maybe a little over 500, a little below 500, but they're playing like a lot better football than their record suggests. And look, I think it's you look at this Kansas City team. Colin Cowherd, another great point this week, said, what do they do particularly well right now? Like, they don't play defense. We know they can move the ball, but when they do, they seem to shoot themselves in the foot with penalties and turnovers. They don't run the football particularly well. Their offensive line hasn't been all that great. I mean, what do they do well, aside from the fact that they have Patrick Mahomes and can strike at any moment? Like, they're not playing good football right now. It's just a simple fact. They lead the league in turnovers, and it's sort of becoming a wider margin by the week, and it's sort of embarrassing. Until that stops, they're not going to be able to be the Kansas City team that we thought they could be. Because even with this defense, I mean, you think with a full go Kansas City offense that's like on its shit from week to week and doesn't turn the ball over, you think they'd still be able to win a lot of these games and cover the spread. But with this defense, I think this is a great spot for Jordan Love to enter and to play to get his first action against a defense that will let you move the football. It's not a whole lot of things that you have to worry about in terms of moving the football in this Kansas City defense. They got lucky. I mean, I hate to use that word nowadays, get lucky, but they were lucky that the Giants were incompetent late on offense in that game. They were lucky.
They really
were. A stupid taunting penalty pretty much saved the Kansas City Chiefs. If they didn't call the taunting penalty on the field, and they probably go score at least a field goal, considering how they were moving the ball at that point.
Yeah, and one last thing I'll say.
I'm not going to bet Kansas City until I see otherwise, until they start not turning the ball over, playing a little bit better defense, start running the ball a little bit more. It's just not a good football team right now. Like, there are probably 7 or 8 teams playing definitively better football than the Kansas City Chiefs right now. There are 2 or 3 other teams that you could argue that are in that vicinity. But go ahead. So yes, I am picking Green Bay plus 7.5.
Yeah, like I said, it feels like a no-brainer. But yeah, what I was gonna say was, it feels like if things do go well for Green Bay, obviously it could go the other way as well. But feels like it's a perfect opportunity to be watching the new era be ushered in for Green Bay. Because flashback to 2007, Brett Favre got injured. Aaron Rodgers goes in there, and I believe it was I don't even know who they were playing, but basically what happened was Brett Favre is playing. He throws like 3 picks. He does his Brett Favre thing. They were struggling terribly. It looked awful. And then Aaron Rodgers goes in there second half after Brett Favre gets injured, and he just shreds that team. It almost comes back and wins. Obviously, it's not the same thing at all, but it kind of feels like an opportunity to do a similar type of thing.
Yeah. Okay. So on to the primetime games for this week. The Sunday night game, and as I mentioned earlier, Tennessee 6-2, another crazy win over the Colts last week at the Rams, who just acquired 8-time Pro Bowl pass rusher Von Miller from the Denver Broncos. So it is Rams, I believe, -7.5 here. Correct? Yes. What do you think? And I guess the real question is, how much does the Derrick Henry loss, how much is that going to hurt this Tennessee team? We know it will hurt, but how much? I guess the question. But go ahead and say what you were going to say.
Yeah, that really is the question. And, it's all just speculation right now, because we haven't seen them play without Derrick Henry since Ryan Tannehill's been the starter. I mean, Derrick Henry, I think he missed 1 game his entire career, and that was in his rookie year when he was a backup. So, I mean, it's anyone's best guess what this will look like. It's all up in the air right now. And this Rams team on the other side, I don't know what to think of them either, because they've had cupcakes these last 2 weeks. I mean,
exactly.
I mean, this game is an absolute, I don't want to say shit show, but shit show. It's just such a difficult game to pick. Shoot, man. I'm gonna pick the Titans to cover, just because a lot of these primetime games have been close this year. And I believe in the Titans pass game to do enough. But I don't know. I don't know.
I feel like Mike Vrabel still doesn't get enough credit for what he's been able to do with this Tennessee team, especially when you look at this defense, a defense that I heavily criticized coming into the season, but they've actually been playing some pretty good football as of late, and that's what's led to a lot of these victories. They're playing opportunistic football and forcing turnovers at opportune times. And I just look at the fact that, look, they're without Henry, but I still think they can have a competent running game. I don't know. I think they picked up Adrian Peterson earlier this week. I don't know who will actually be playing running back for them in this game, but I feel like the scheme and all that will allow them to run the football. And I think with Julio Jones probably coming back this week, as it says here, I think they're going to be able to move the ball. And I think Ryan Tannehill, veteran quarterback, capable quarterback, we know he can win games. The Rams, their record is good. We all know that they have one of the best rosters in the league, and they're probably still one of the best teams in the league, but they've played 3 straight weeks of cupcakes. And sometimes after that, it can be hard to, readjust to the rigors of the NFL. And Tennessee they're hot. And I don't think the
loss is going to matter as much as people think. You can still have a competent running game. So I'm going to pick Tennessee +7.5.
Yeah, I agree. I think a lot of the points you made really make sense to me. I mean, I've been seeing a lot of people saying all this about Derrick Henry was their entire team. That he was the reason they were even good. Like that's ludicrous. I mean, this defense has been playing fantastic football. Well, maybe not fantastic, but good enough football.
Right.
So moving on to the last game, Monday Night Football, Chicago at Pittsburgh. Wow. This is probably a worst case scenario matchup for the Bears. Like you finally see some progression from Justin Fields. And then next week you've got probably the best defensive football on the road in prime time. What do you think?
So it's interesting because up to this point, the Pittsburgh Steelers have played the toughest schedule in terms of opponent winning percentage in the entire league. 3-4 weeks ago, they were 1-3. They were reeling after a loss to Green Bay. In the 3 games since then, against the Broncos, the Seahawks, and then after the bye week, Cleveland. You look at what's happened, and we'll talk about offense first because we know the defense is good. We knew that coming into the season. Right. We knew that last year. We knew that for the past couple of years. But when you look at what's happened offensively, the offensive line, it's young. We're starting 2 rookies on the offensive line. Kendrick Green at center, Dan Moore at left tackle. It hasn't been great, but it's working and it's improving. And they're getting a push in the run game, something we haven't seen in Pittsburgh since Le'Veon Bell a couple of years ago, when that old offensive line was still like in its prime and was one of the best in the league. Now we have a younger offensive line, and they're starting to play. They're starting to get pushed, and that's really helping. 3 games, Najee Harris, not Najee Harris himself, but 3 games in a row now, we've had 100-plus yards rushing in the running game. In all 3 of those games, we have won. And in Ben's career, I think he's won something crazy like close to 80% of his games when he has a 100-yard rusher, or the Steelers run for 100 yards. And we know that that's Steeler football. Run the ball, stop the run, and play these close games and grind out victories. There was a couple of years where it was offense and flash and Martavis Bryant and Antonio Brown and all these crazy weapons, Le'Veon Bell, and you put up 38 points every week and you hope the defense is good enough. But now it's back to typical Steelers football. Mike Tomlin, despite all the circumstances, bad offensive back in Roethlisberger, what seemed to be everything, injuries on the defense. I mean, Devin Bush goes down with a groin injury. TJ Watt down with a groin injury. All of this stuff, and here they are, 4-3, and they have the next 2 weeks. They have the Bears at home and the Lions at home. So if they take care of business, they should be 6-3 by the end of next week. And look, I think they will. I think it's a bad matchup for Chicago, one of the worst offensive lines in football. TJ Watt is second in the league in sacks, despite already having his bye week and missing a game due to injury. He's still dominating. Alex Highsmith is starting to show himself. So they still have a dominant edge rushing duo. The secondary has been playing better the past couple of weeks. Minkah Fitzpatrick is sort of turning back into his old self after struggling for the first couple of seasons. I could be wrong. We all know that historically, even though Mike Tomlin's a great coach, these are the spots that Pittsburgh seems to sort of struggle, even though you think that they would dominate in these spots. After a big win, they tend to play down the competition at points in times. Games they should win by a lot, they don't. And it was, but I have confidence. This is going to be the game that I think the Steelers offense is going to get to that 30-point threshold that they haven't reached yet. I think the offense is going to break out this game. And I think the pass rush will feast on Justin Fields.
Yeah. One thing I didn't mention earlier when we were talking about the Chiefs was they did trade for Melvin Ingram from the Steelers. Yeah. So that does allow Chris Jones to move inside, but that we'll talk about that more next week. In terms of this game, like you said, it's just a terrible matchup for Chicago. But I will say one thing that I heard from Marcus Whitman, or that franchise guy, a podcaster that I listened to. He made a pretty interesting point. He said that he thinks that losing Juju Smith-Schuster actually helped this offense because it simplified things and it's one less mouth to feed. So they were able to feed their explosive playmakers and simplify this offense a little bit, which is interesting. But I actually think there may be some truth to that. I don't think Juju really fit into what Pittsburgh likes to do, which is that quick passing game and getting it like manufacturing touches for their explosive guys. And Juju isn't that explosive athletically. So, but anyways, I mentioned that I watched that Chicago-San Francisco game. And one thing that I will say is it wasn't a fluke that we saw progression from Justin Fields. It was a better game plan. Simply put, they were actually getting him out of the pocket on rollouts. They were taking shots down the field. They were playing more to Justin Fields' strengths, which is really good to see. But I just think it's not going to be enough. In terms of the spread, that makes it's tough. But I'm going to pick Pittsburgh to cover. I kind of contradicted myself when I was talking analysis, but
I have 3 relatively quick things to say.
Okay, yeah.
Number 1, the Steelers team, fantastic on Monday Night Football. Number 2, I mentioned Najee Harris and the fact that he's playing out of his mind and starting to get a rhythm in the running game and the offensive line. But Roethlisberger as well. He's 5 touchdowns, no interceptions in this 3-game winning streak. And those first 4 weeks, we saw a lot of the turnovers that plagued him late last season, taking care of the football. That's really what we need him to do. Be a veteran quarterback. You know how to win these games. Just don't make those mistakes and hope that this offensive line can give you good enough protection, which it's been doing a decent job at. There's just some pass rushers that are going to get theirs. Myles Garrett's one of those guys. Like, you're not going to hold him down for an entire game.
Yeah.
It's just not going to happen. So that's number 2. Number 3 is, you mentioned the Smith-Schuster factor, which I think has some validity to it, but this 3-game winning streak has also coincided with an uptick in usage for Pat Freiermuth, the rookie tight end.
Yeah.
I said during the 3-game losing streak, they needed to use the tight end. I mean, they have 2 really good ones in Ebron and Freiermuth. And I think Freiermuth has a chance to be special. I think he's really good. He can do a little bit of everything. And, Ben likes to have that guy in the middle of the field that he can trust. And it's shown the past couple of weeks. And they're getting it to Freiermuth a lot more. And I think he's kind of taking that role that Smith-Schuster had previously. And I think it's really helping. I think it's really helping this offense. So those are the three things I wanted to say. Pittsburgh historically does really well on Monday night. I don't know why, but that's just the way it is, especially at home. They're also going to be playing their black color rush uniforms in this game. They're 7-0 when they wear those uniforms. Just saying. Ben's playing well. I don't want to jinx it. Chicago still has a really good defense, but I just think it's sort of a mismatch up front,
Right.
as it is a lot of weeks.
Yeah. So that's going to do it for the picks. Is there anything that you would like to change?
If there was one, and I said it earlier, it would be the Baltimore-Minnesota game. Just because I think about the fact that the Ravens, coming off a bye week, they have the better coach, they have the better quarterback, they are the better team. They're playing at home, and they've been sitting on that blowout loss to the Bengals for 2 weeks now. But I don't know if I want to. I think I'm going to stick with my prediction. I'm not going to change it, but I'm going to take the hit. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I'm not going to change it. I'm going to stick with what I think.
Yeah, I think it's better not to overthink it. I think going with your initial thought has been pretty clearly the best way to go throughout the season, and I have seen that firsthand. That's gonna do it for episode 82, guys. Thank you for listening. I think that was a pretty good episode, me personally. That's gonna do it. Any closing thoughts before we sign
The
off?
only thing I'll say is we're going to have a basketball episode coming out next 2-3 days, probably pretty sure. It's really exciting stuff. We got NBA to talk about. We're now like 2.5 weeks into the season. And of course, college basketball. I love my college basketball. So keep an eye on the lookout for that. At the end of this week, I'll have another Spurs mini episode, probably Saturday or Sunday sometime. So appreciate all the support for that. And we'll be back next week for our week 10 picks. I know it's crazy. We're already after this week officially halfway through the NFL season. But now it really starts to ramp up and get a lot more interesting.
Yeah,
so.
This NFC race is going to be insane closing out this year. We say that every year, but this year, like normally it's like maybe like 3 teams deep, but this year it's
5 or 6 teams.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
It really, really is. And it's gonna be great. But yeah, that's gonna do it. Peace out, guys.
Peace.